British politics is in a state of flux. Recent electoral wins by the United Kingdom Independence Party has seen the anti-European populists take 2 parliamentary seats off the ruling Conservatives. North of the border, the Scottish National Party is going from strength to strength, threatening to seriously challenge the opposition Labour Party in one of its heartlands. With a general election now just 5 months away, the mainstream parties are scrambling to find a response that they hope will resonate with voters at the ballot box. With me here to discuss British politics are Matthew Goodwin of Chatham House and Philip Stevens, the FT's chief political commentator. Welcome to you both. Matthew, I'd like to start with you. Nigel Farage, after the latest electoral victory for Ukip, said British politics has become unpredictable beyond comprehension. Is he right?
Well, it's certainly become more unpredictable. There are essentially 2 big unknowns that we're going to be watching over the next 6 months. One is the effect of the resurgence SNP on the Labour Party in Scotland, which is also symbolic of Labour's wider problem among its core heartlands in the north and Scotland. But secondly, the rise of Ukip and how that's going to impact on key marginal seats for the Conservatives along the East Coast and the South East, but also what that means in terms of the British working class, which Ukip has been growing fastest among.
Philip, do you agree that these new sort of, we broadly just define them as being populist forces, but are actually sort of reshaping the British political landscape?
What you normally catch sort of 6 months before a general election is a sort of mood of excitement among the big parties. I think the prevailing emotion among the Conservatives, Labour and the Liberal Democrats at the moment is fear. The Conservatives fear that they can't win because of Ukip. Labour fears it can't win partly because of the SNP in Scotland, partly because it's rather mishandled its opposition prospectus. And the Liberal Democrats in coalition have been squeezed. So it was always thought, I think, that if the mould of British politics, 2-party politics, would ever be broken, it would be broken from the outside. But what we're also seeing now, I think, is an implosion of support for the big parties themselves.
You mentioned that phrase. I just want to pick you up on that, the mould being broken. It's a very resonant phrase to anyone who studies UK politics. I mean, it's often been proclaimed and then has failed to happen. Do you think this time might be different?
I think we're closer to it than we've ever been in the post-war period in Britain, simply because the shared support of the 2 parties is now in the 60 to 65% range. Back in the 1950s, it was 95 or at one point 98%. So it's the erosion of support for the 2 big parties, Conservative and Labour, which mirrored by the SNP and by Ukip, which I think is the key factor in this election.
Just quickly, Matthew, on that, would you agree with that? And then I wanted to ask you specifically what's underpinning this.
Yeah, well, there was an academic paper written once called "Is the Two-Party System Crumbling?" That was in 1982, and that was in reference to the rise of the Social Democratic Party, which is often compared to Ukip. There are some key differences, though, in terms of what's going on now from the 1980s, and that really concerns UKIP's base of support. It's far more socially distinct than the SDP's ever was, and those who are moving over to Nigel Farage feel far more strongly attached to Ukip than the SDP voters did in the 80s. That suggests that we might be talking about this revolt on the right beyond May 2015.
But I think you've also been pointing out that it's not just the Conservative Party that UKIP's taking votes off, but also Labour. So yeah,
the conventional view in British politics was that Ukip is just a second home for disgruntled Eurosceptic Conservatives. That is a key source of strength for Nigel Farage, but also now, and in particular over the last 12 months, all of the research and analysis is pointing to the fact that UKIP's gains this year are coming far more from non-conservative voters, Labour, disaffected Liberal Democrats and non-voters, which gives UKIP more of a broader church look than a single issue byproduct of conservative divisions.
I think the key point there, though, is that UKIP can do much more damage to the Conservatives than it can to Labour, because we're not talking about UKIP winning scores of seats at the general election. In my own view, it'll be a handful at most, and it could just be 1. The key thing is, though, that they affect the vote in Labour Conservative marginals contest, as it were. And it looks like that the rise in the UKIP vote will deprive the Conservatives of more seats by handing them to Labour. then will deprive Labour of more seats by handing them to the Conservatives.
And on that, the big story of this election will not be the direct effect of UKIP in terms of winning seats. The big story will be the indirect effect of UKIP in impacting on Conservative Labour Party support.
Flowing from that, it looks as though the chances of having another coalition government are very high. I think you'd both agree.
No, I think the least likely outcome of the next general election is a coalition. I think the most likely outcome is a minority government, if you like, informally supported by some of the smaller parties.
Matthew?
I can see a number of scenarios possible, especially when you've got the vote for the main parties being compressed to such a degree, and you're going to see possibly the SNP with a larger parliamentary presence, UKIP possibly 5 to 8 seats on a good day. Then you've got this big question about what's going to happen to the Liberal Democrats. Can they hold up 30 seats? I can see any number of scenarios possible at this point. Matthew
Goodwin, Philip Stevens, thank you both very much, and thank you for watching. For more on this and other topics covered by our analysis team, please go to ft.com/analysis. Until the next time, goodbye.